Hi, my name is Dan Margulies. I'm a 2017 Musmach of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, and I'm coming to you from the urban oasis that we have here in Washington, D.C. I wanted to share with you some thoughts on the fourth Perek, the fourth chapter of Masechet Shevi'it, in honor of and in learning toward the upcoming Shemitah year. And this Perek deals with a number of different topics related to the Shemitah year. The first is many different questions related to a secondary aspect of agricultural work during the Shemitah year. So not the actual work of harvesting and pruning and planting and taking care of the crops themselves, but steps that might be taken to improve the land, improve the agricultural output of the land, things like that, which are sort of secondarily prohibited, and the various technical restrictions that come into play on those questions. And some of that discussion is a little bit more technical, but does get into questions of how the Shemitah year is not just an abstract or very technical limitation on specific labors that might have been what the Deoraita aspect, the biblical requirements of Shemitah are, but actually the ethos, the mindset, the purpose of Shemitah to take a year off of labor in a broader sense and to appreciate what the land is able to do on its own are steps that we should actually take ourselves away from the land in broader ways. That's the sort of first half of the chapter. The second half of the Perek deals with questions relating to what's called the Kedushat Shevi'it, the actual prohibitions and obligations that are related to the produce that grows naturally, especially tree fruits that grow naturally during the Shemitah year, and the certain holiness or special status that they have because they're produced during the Shemitah year. And part of what comes into play there, especially in this Perek, is the obligation to eat those fruits. That the Torah says that the fruits of Shemitah are le'ochla, they're to be eaten. And some have pointed out, I know Rabbi Yosef Rimon and a number of other Parshanim have pointed out the comparison between the Shemitah year and the earliest phases of human existence in the Garden of Eden and Gan Eden, that there too, all of the tree fruits, all of the produce was meant to be for human enjoyment, human sustenance, and human benefit. And that the Shemitah year, to a certain degree, is an attempt to kind of recreate the experience of living in the Garden of Eden in some earthly way or some, post-exilic way, that is post-exile from Eden. And thinking about then the special status of those fruits is that they have to be eaten when they're fully ripe, or should be primarily eaten when they're fully ripe, not before they've reached their proper maturity. They have to be eaten after being harvested and being brought into the home as a normal harvest, normal produce. And part of the other set of prohibitions that come out of that as well is then beyond the normal prohibitions of pruning fruit trees or cutting down fruit trees, especially during the Shemitah year when those trees will be producing fruit that should be eaten, prohibitions related to pruning or cutting down fruit-bearing trees, which would limit or inhibit their ability to produce edible fruit. And so much here, seeing the emphasis that really, as much as human agriculture and human cultivation of these crops and produce is centered around how can we get the most out of it for our own benefit. In fact, thinking about how trees and crops and produce are actually very naturally able to produce on their own. They don't always need our help. They don't always need cultivation, especially fruit-bearing trees naturally produce, sometimes even overproduce the amounts of fruits that can be eaten and should be eaten and enjoyed, not only by human beings, but by animals, and feed back into the plant's growth cycle, how those plants propagate themselves in so many different ways. And all of that tying together, I really am so drawn to, and I love the idea that the Shemitah year is, in a sense, a kind of return to that primordial existence. Before human beings were, so to say, cursed with having to toil in the fields for our sustenance, when all of the fruit was provided for us, right? Wheat or grains and other field crops need to be cultivated in order to yield produce. But fruit trees can grow naturally in a garden, in an orchard setting, or in a forest setting, and be harvested and enjoyed and appreciated in a way which does not require so much human cultivation and human labor. And so thinking about that in terms of the Shemitah year, especially the status of the fruit trees and their fruits, the way in which many different secondary forms of agricultural labor are prohibited, and the ways in which we have to actually treat those fruits with a certain amount of respect and recognition, to eat them in their proper time, to eat them when they're ripe, to not let them spoil, and all of that tying back into this fourth Perek of Masechet Shevi'it. I wish you happy learning, Shana Tova, and a wonderful Shemitah year.